Hello again, everyone. I'm glad to be here with you again with another episode of The Fact, the series that discusses the international political issues every week. In this special episode, we have Professor Anthony Hall from Canada. He's a political analyst and author, and we would like to talk about the history of imperialism in the United States and how Native people were treated in this country. So, Professor, would you please explain for us about the history of imperialism and how United States have or has treated Native people of America in these recent centuries?
Since 9/11, our society in the West has been greatly affected by something called the global war on terror. And this word terrorism has been used in a very aggressive way. I think the word terrorism is somewhat like the word savage. And we have a history of imperialism which often gives as a justification, well, we are the civilized people and we are going into a land of savages. And so we're not going to focus on taking their land and the appropriation of resources. We're bringing civilization. We're bringing a higher form of human interaction, Christianity, knowledge of financial systems, technology. And I would argue that the global war on terror sort of plays on these older themes of civilization claiming to ascend over savagery to justify imperialism. And of course, the savages in sort of the Anglo tradition, the British Empire tradition, that would be the native people of the Western Hemisphere. You know, they were referred to as savages, sauvages, in French, sauvage. So it's very interesting to picture, what is the origins of the global war on terror. I would argue that the origins of the global war on terror really lie within the Declaration of Independence, created on July the 4th, 1776. And so there was a displeasure with the British control of the 13 colonies, and there was an uprising of the settler population. And this Declaration of Independence, mostly written by Thomas Jefferson, has a very important role in history. It's often referred to in a good light, freedom and equality of peoples and that kind of thing. But if you go through the actual text, much of the Declaration of Independence is a condemnation of King George, the ruler of the British Empire. And at the very end of the list of supposed crimes committed by King George, it says, "He did bring on the merciless Indian savages, whose known means of warfare is undistinguished destruction of all sexes, ages, and conditions." To me, this is essentially the war on terror. Okay, you have this declaration of human rights, human liberties, but the Indians don't really fit into that. They're not going to be considered part of this human family, this rights-possessing constituency that created the United States. In fact, the lands that the indigenous peoples live on for thousands of years, the U.S. is created by the settler population, because why should Britain take the benefits of all of this land? The settler population could create a United States of America and could itself move to the West and take over these lands. So you could see that facet of the Declaration of Independence as a kind of preparation. We're going to take over your land. Here's our legal rationalization. You're savages. You do indiscriminate violence. You do destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. You're violent. You're terrorists. So to me, the global war on terror, it kind of came so easily to be sort of American policy because it has such deep roots in the way the country was first conceived. and how it's structured. So of course, then we have, 9/11, some people argue, I think with a lot of documentation, evidence behind them, that the official interpretation is incorrect, that it was a job by Osama bin Laden, 19 people with box cutters. It's a kind of a audacious story, a fraudulent story. Somebody did it. If it wasn't those 19 people with box cutters, who did it? And, there is a body of evidence developing that the project for the new American century, he said, we want to build up the military muscle of the United States to serve Israel, really, because so many of the project of New American Century members were dual citizens with Israel, Wolfowitz, Feith, and on, Pearl. It kind of replicated the clean break document, so 9/11 happens. We have this global war on terror, and the essential purpose is to demonize the savages. Only the savages are going to be Muslims, and then the target number one, the group number one, are the Palestinians, because obviously this is a big problem for Israel. And Israel, of course, draws on much of the same religious theology as does the United States. We are the chosen people. In the Old Testament, God has given us a covenant to this land, and we are to bring civilization, a higher civilization. And this will be exemplary for the whole world. This is the psychology of it. And, Jabotinsky, the founder of revisionist Zionism, he's looking very much at the history of the United States and saying, look, the Palestinians, the indigenous peoples, they're never going to resolve themselves to giving up their land and then being our friend. Interestingly, in the North American context, there was a missionary movement, Christian missionaries, who would say, come and be like us, learn our languages, accept our religion, and you can become kind of part of us. That doesn't exist in Israel. There is no invitation to Palestinians to join in the project of building Israel, which is, defining itself very assertively as a Jewish state. It's not for other kind of people, it's for a certain kind of people, which is quite similar to the United States. The United States was founded, not for slaves. There's going to continue to be slavery. There was no role of Native Americans in the founding of the United States, in the meetings, or there was no, consultation with the indigenous peoples. So it was very exclusivist as well. And the Palestinian issue, I think it's quite similar to what happened in North America, the Western expansion through Indian Wars. So the prototype has been there, and Israel, after 1948, kind of takes over that process and kind of takes all of that history, and now it's to be applied in a new context. And I think, indigenous peoples all over can kind of identify with Palestinians, people throughout southwestern Asia, people in Africa, people in Asia. They have experienced imperial globalization, European empires, as a force coming at them, as a force to dispossess them, to disentitle, to take away land and resources. So it's quite a familiar process, and the dominant process in humanity really is to see colonization, imperialism as an intrusion, as an incursion, as an aggression, as a negating, attempting to negate what is indigenous and deep and well-rooted. So I think there's quite a continuity in this history.